welcome to episode 4 of Flute Fix. This is a series of videos where I answer your questions about the flute. If you'd like to get in touch with a question, please do contact me via Instagram at rodflute or Facebook at Roderick Seed Flute. You can also contact me via my website roderickseedflute.com. Question 1 comes from Astrid, and she asks if I have any tips for going between D and C sharp in the second octave, and whether it's bad to leave the last two fingers down for C sharp. So normally but with those two down. So really it doesn't make too much difference, it's still the same note, but what I would say is that if you're relying too much on those fingers always being down for C sharp, it could be that you're not quite balanced with your flute. And so the first point to address is your flute balanced in your hands? And so the 3 points of balance are on your chin, so where your flute goes, there. The first finger or the index finger of your left hand, and then the thumb of your right hand. And so a good little exercise or test is to see if you can hold your flute steady without it rolling back like that, with just the index finger and the thumb. So you see it staying still there, and you might find it wobbles a little bit at first, and just be patient to see if that stays there. And then you bring your flute to you, and then now the fingers can move freely. If you rely too much on fingers to help keep your flute balanced, particularly for notes like C sharp or C natural, that is an indication that you're not quite balanced, and that will also mean that your fingers aren't so free to move because they'll be pressing down to keep your flute balanced. So I'd say you can use both fingerings, it's not a problem, especially when it's very fast. I tend to leave down those just because that means there's less fingers to move and it's easier to coordinate your fingers. But if you practice both and then you've got the option, that's the best. So if you're doing some finger exercises with D and C sharp or D and C natural, I would suggest practicing with really gentle fingers, so practice it really slow, minimal movement of the fingers, just enough, so your fingers don't go up here and flap, but they're just moving very gently, and so try to make sure you're not hitting the key as well. And another thing you can try is hands separately. So practicing the left hand alone for D to C sharp, we've got the thumb 2 and 3, and then those just come off. So this motion here. And then in the right hand, we've got all 3 down here with the pinky up, and then it's the opposite. So the pinky goes down and the 3 come up. So just like a piano player would practice hands separately, that's what we can do. And then when you put it together, you've had that chance for your brain to sort of work out both aspects there and then coordinate those two together. Okay, so with your finger exercises, you can make up some based on scales. So if you've got a D major scale, you could add in this awkward finger pattern. Okay, so, and then you can extend that to go above and below. So practice that with the both fingerings so that you are used to doing both, and do those hands separately as well. So I hope that helps. The second question comes from Louise, and she asks, how do you mentally prepare for a lesson or a performance? And if things aren't going to plan, have you got any strategies for getting back into a more relaxed space? The first point I would make about this is that nerves are completely natural and they come from a good place. We want to do well, we want to please our teachers, we don't want to disappoint them, we don't want to disappoint our audience, and so we want to give them a good concert. So they're normal because we put a bit of pressure on ourselves to do well. The issue is whether they take over and sort of get in the way of expression. So there's some strategies that you can do to help your nerves. What makes me nervous is whether I'm prepared or not for a concert or audition. And so to make myself feel more confident, I'll make sure that I've prepared the music, I've researched it well, and I've looked through the whole score, that my sound is on form, I've got good technique that day. So it's a whole process, and so I don't really have a day where I'm not practicing if I've got something like this coming up. So I find that helps. Also, it helps to realise that it's not all about me. So in a performance, it's about the music, it's about what you want to put across, the composer's intentions. If you're in an orchestra, it's how you play with all your colleagues, and blending and having your moment to shine, but it's not about you, basically. So I think just taking away the focus from yourself and focusing instead on the music, and just being grateful that you can actually have this opportunity to play for people, and you've got the opportunity to have a teacher who will listen to you play. Having those kind of positive feelings about music and preparing for a lesson might help you, instead of focusing on is it good enough. And also that you have to remember that it's just a snapshot in time, and everybody is on the same journey of improving themselves with their playing. So there's always room to improve, and so don't try and be perfect, because it will never happen. I've never given a perfect performance. There's always something that's could be better, but that's the beauty of learning an instrument, is that there's always something to work on. After doing a nice warm-up before a concert or a lesson, I feel a bit calmer, perhaps, but if the nerves start to creep in again, I think focusing on your breathing is really important, and it just helps settle everything, because when we get nervous, there's this sort of pent-up feeling, and it's this fight or flight kind of thing, and so all the adrenaline's pumping around your body, and the breathing can get quite shallow. So something I try to do is just breathe in for 4 through the nose, and then breathe out as long as I can through the mouth. So let's say breathing in for 4, and then just letting it all go. So with the in-breath, you can also associate that with a happy thought. So like, I'm grateful to play my instrument. And then when you breathe out, you're like, I don't need to be perfect. It's not about me. And so send those sort of negative thoughts out with your breath. And that helps me, at least. It's also important to remember why you chose the flute and what excited you about it when you first started. And so it's quite easy, like later on in life when there's pressure to make money from the flute, or there's so many concerts to prepare for, you can lose sight of that childlike quality where you really just enjoyed playing the flute and making beautiful sounds. So trying to hark back to a time and remember something happy in your childhood or your initial stages of learning the flute. So for example, it could be when you started to play in a youth orchestra and that feeling of the orchestra around you, or your very first lesson with a teacher that you really admired. Some of those things can help you feel calmer and happy about playing. So it's also important to remember that we have our support of the ground, the feet with the contact with the ground, knees bent, and the relationship of your head, neck and back. Often that gets quite compromised when we're nervous because we just forget about it and we're just too concerned about playing well. But actually, if you try to think, okay, my head is forward and up, my neck and back are in a nice alignment, I'm not compromising the length of my torso, my breath is free, my ribs are free to move, and all of those nice directions you can give yourself will help your sound as well. So that's one strategy in a performance situation. If things aren't quite going to plan, just think of that, what the Alexander technique called the primary control, head, neck and back, and that might help you. And that will help your breathing, which will help your sound. It will keep it nice and stable, and really focus on blowing out really freely through your phrases, and not trying to control it too much, but really release the air all the way into the next in-breath. So I hope that helps. The last question for today comes from Lindsay, and she asks if I have any tips for the fourth variation of Chopin's Variations on a Theme by Rossini. This is a really fun piece, and I thought I'd just go through how I would practice this variation, and hopefully you'll get some ideas from that. First thing I would do is to get really good release of sound on the melody notes. So having played the theme and all the variations up to that point, we've got a good idea of what the melody is. But in this variation, it's slightly different because the melody comes in a very short note. So nice and short, but still with plenty of life in the sound. The next thing I do is work on the intervals and showing the melodic notes still clearly and softer on the accompaniment notes. So first I do 1 and 2 of each 4-note pattern, it's loud to soft. Then 2 and 3. And then 3 and 4. Then 4 and 1, so softer to louder. Then putting all those notes together. Next point would be breathing. We have a lot of semiquavers which are continuous, and so finding a place to breathe can be tricky. What I would say is find the most natural place to breathe based on your structure of phrases. So for me, after the second bar, just after that, and then breathe and continue there. The next place to breathe would be before the theme comes back. And then the next place would be after each of the quavers in bar 7. And then follow that kind of idea for the rest of it. So the next place. Before you have the pickup to each phrase. Next would be practicing the articulation. So making sure that we've got a nice even sound through the articulated passages. So practice really good even sound slowly and just gradually speed that up. So that's the accompaniment, and to have a really good even sound throughout there is good, but we need even more beautiful sound on the melodic notes. So practice those a little out of time, just to practice the two sorts of sounds. Etc. And then you just play it in time, but having that thought of melodic notes and accompaniment notes. And then last suggestion would be just to enjoy and have fun with it, because it's a very happy variation. So I hope that helps. So I'll be back next week with some more questions. I look forward to seeing you for episode 5 of Flute Fix.